Welcome to Screen Crush. I'm Ryan Airy, and I am joined by the one and only Matt Singer, Screen Crush editor-in-chief and writer of Spider-Man from Amazing to Spectacular. How you doing, Matt?
Now that you plugged the book, I'm doing fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Ryan.
And then we have Rachel Leishman from the Mary Sue. What's going on, Rachel?
Nothing much. I'm just very excited to talk about my sweet boy, Peter Parker.
I want to talk about where this is going. Like, what you guys are excited to see in the future. Any theories, predictions? Tom Holland is contracted for one more MCU film as Spider-Man. But we haven't gotten like an official confirmation he's going to be in more like solo Sony movies. Rachel, what do you think? What can we look forward to, or what do you want to see? What gets you excited about the future here? What are your theories? Go for it.
My theory is, I am so happy that he is broke and in an apartment that is like a piece of crap. And all I want is him with a camera. It's all I wanted from Far From Home. It's like they had that fun bit where he was making movies and then they kind of dropped it off, but brought it back a little in What If. And I was like, great, stop teasing me. Like, just hand the kid a camera. Like, I don't understand why he doesn't have one. And so, like, to see him in that apartment and knowing, like, he's like, all right, the only thing I have that can make me money is taking pictures of myself for the Daily Bugle. Like, I cannot wait. And the way that this movie did what I didn't think it was going to do, I thought it was going to find a way so that he would have MJ and Ned, but he does not, and he truly did the most Peter Parker thing and lied to them and was like, I will come and I will tell you and I will be back together, and then he didn't do that because he saw how happy they were and was like, no, I would rather be a martyr and be alone than have my friends. And so just the way they set that up, I was like, great, I want poor broke Peter Parker for the next 3 movies. I don't care where it goes. I don't care what villains we see, even though I do want my Kraven movie very badly. I will, like, whatever they're doing, great. Because it feels like a response to the people who were like, he's not poor, this is not my Peter Parker, by them doing this and erasing the little bit of, like, financial security he had with connection to Tony Stark. Like, them erasing that put him even further into, like, the Peter Parker from the comics. And so I truly, they could just give me a movie of him living in that apartment trying to make ends meet and I would watch it, because that's all I want. And I'm just so excited that they did that at the end and made him into, like, the next era of his origin story.
Yeah, and Kraven's been cast in a Sony solo movie, Aaron Taylor Johnson, right?
Yeah.
But is that in the Venom Morbius universe? I don't know where Morbius falls into this. And that's kind of the interesting thing, that, like, it's this ending, and I loved it for the same reason you did. Broke apartment, rent, the landlord asking for rent again, cloth suit. And it's a way to tell, like, the same story but in a new way. But Matt, you brought up a really good point to me previous to this, which is it also gives Sony an out for making more movies and not really tying them to the MCU. So what do you think? What's going to happen? What can we look forward to?
I mean, if I had to look at just the logistics of the whole thing, the ending does seem like a way to never, yes, you could make more movies with Tom Holland, but you could also never show his version of the character again, and you would feel like you got a complete arc. They did sort of tell this long-form, very unusual version of his origin story. And the other thing is, as I was watching the movie, Rachel mentioned earlier, like, part of what she really liked about the earlier Tom Holland movies is that Tom Holland was a young guy. He looked like a kid. He was a convincing teenager. In this movie, he is not a convincing teenager. I think Tom Holland is like 25 now, maybe. And, like, he's going to high school, and you're just like, this is just as absurd as when, like, Andrew Garfield was in high school, maybe even more absurd. I don't know. That's maybe a subjective thing. But, he's starting to look like an older guy relative to Spider-Man. He's a young guy, but, like, if you're talking about, Spider-Man should be like a guy in his teens or early 20s or whatever, like, he doesn't look like that guy anymore. So, like, logistically, like, how much longer can he do it before he is kind of like an older Spider-Man, which, I'm sadly an older guy myself now. I don't have a problem with that. It's just, is that what Sony wants to do, is make like a 30-something Spider-Man. In the past, they have not. It's like any time the actor has gotten a little older, maybe there were extenuating circumstances, other reasons, but, like, I don't know the exact ages, but Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, when they hit that sort of 30-ish range, that was sort of the beginning of the end. So I could definitely, like you said, Ryan, supposedly he has like one more Marvel movie, that he's contracted to do. It's hard to figure out what that could be right now. But, like, if you told me that this was his last solo movie, I wouldn't be shocked. If you told me, oh, they're going to do more, I wouldn't be shocked either. But I would be surprised if he makes 3 more of these. Because by the time they do it, he'd have to be like 32, 33. Mm-hmm. And, they did, like you said, they left him in a place where he's not necessarily a kid in high school anymore. But at a certain point, I think you do kind of, unless you're going to go full, like, middle-aged Peter Parker from Spider-Verse, which very relatable character for me, so I'm fine with that. But unless they're going to do that. I wouldn't mind that. They're not going to do that. I think at a certain point they probably are either going to, I'm not sure whether that means that they're going to stop showing Spider-Man in the Marvel movies eventually, or just recast, a different actor. Which I could also, again, when you've made the world forget who Peter Parker is, it's very easy to just put another actor. That's like a kind of a brilliant, in a practical meta sense. It's sort of an ingenious way of now having like. Oh, like your brain will be like, oh, okay, I understand why no one recognizes Peter Parker. They're not supposed to. That's why he looks different. He's a different guy now. It's almost like the spell, whatever spell it was, transforms Tom Holland into whatever actor they cast next, like in a certain weird sense. So, I mean, if I had to like bet money on it, I don't know that I would predict, okay, he's probably going to show up in one more Marvel movie somewhere. But if I had to predict another Spider-Man in my home or whatever they're going to call it, I think it's possible, but I wouldn't necessarily stake my life on it. And, he's talked about, I love doing the character, but maybe it's time to move on soon. Like, he's already kind of put that out there. So, yeah.
He's doing contract negotiations is what he's doing.
Well, yeah, and then good for him. And, get that money, go for it. But, there could be some truth to that as well. So, we'll see. I mean, like I said, I thought the movie did a really nice job of leaving it in a place where you could absolutely and very easily pick things up in another movie. But if that's hasta la vista, baby, to the Tom Holland Spider-Man, you feel like you got a complete journey with him, and they left it in a very satisfying place. So, that's about as good as you can hope for.
So the three of us are. We're not just film people, we're Spider-Man people. I'm a massive fan. I can't show you the rest of the video store right now. We have Spider-Man stuff up everywhere. And, Rachel, you mentioned that you want your Kraven movie, you want it now. And when you look back at all these films, we've seen basically 3 goblins at this point. We've seen Sandman, we've seen a Vulture, a Dr. Octopus that was so good, they wouldn't dare recast him for the MCU. They de-aged Alfred Molina instead and made him from that universe. So when you look at this and you look at the Rogues Gallery, who is it just as a fan you really want to see brought to the screen?
Sure. Well, I was also correct because after Far From Home, I was convinced that this movie was going to be a Kraven movie, which is what John Watts was going to do if he didn't get everybody. So
really?
So I feel very justified in my original theory of Kraven the Hunter was going to hunt. I thought he was going to hunt down Peter Parker, and Peter Parker was going to have to hide in different universes. I had a wild little theory. But I love Kraven the Hunter as a villain. I think he is fascinating. And I love him from the cartoons. I even like whatever weird thing that they're trying to sell in Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark when the Green Goblin is he's a little into the animals. I think he's very weird. And so having a movie where smartass Peter Parker is this man just hunts animals that is now hunting me. I think it'd be funny and interesting. So that is forever my choice. Everyone had Hobgoblin theories, and I think Hobgoblin would be exciting at some point. But when you get into all the goblins, you get into weird territory where Norman and Gwen have a kid together and stuff, and so I'm we can leave it with the Green Goblin and then maybe bring on Harry Osborn at some point, but like Kraven is my choice currently.
Yeah, they've done kind of all the biggies at this point, I suppose, most of them anyway, except Kraven, who certainly, he's an interesting character. The stories with him tend to be a little darker and more depressing, which is not always my favorite version of Spider-Man. But there's a place for that. The other villain that I really enjoy, although maybe he's not, exciting or interesting enough or cool enough to stand on his own. Maybe you could stick him in a Kraven movie too, because they've kind of been associated with each other through the years, is Chameleon. Who's a really
Hell yes.
is a really interesting villain, and like the fact that he can change his face and disguise himself as anyone is something that like you would think would lend himself to a movie in terms of the however they would pull it off. Tom Cruise has been wearing changing his face to look like different people for like 25 years now in the Mission Impossible movies, so they could easily do it where it could be really cool. He's never had that's about his only power, so maybe he's not enough of a threat to be alone, which is why maybe you would want to put him in a movie with another villain like a Kraven or somebody. But I always thought he was a very interesting villain, and the fact that he can look like Spider-Man or frame Spider-Man, and then there's all these metaphorical elements to this character who doesn't have a face or can look like anyone, and so you could do a movie about identity. I mean, I guess they just did that with this movie kind of, but that's a way that he's always interesting in context of Spider-Man, is because Spider-Man has all these issues about who am I, and am I Spider-Man, am I Peter Parker? And so whenever you put him up against Chameleon, this guy who can be anyone and has no fixed identity, there's always there's interesting story ideas or interesting story potential there. So that's who that's who I'm as you guys are talking, I'm racking my brain thinking of people, and he was really the only one that came to mind that I'm like, yeah, I would like to see that. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people watching would say Venom, which again, we alluded to this earlier, but they seem to have basically been like, oh, you thought we were going to do it? Spider-Man Venom movie? Oh, no, we're not. We're not going to do it.
Psych!
Yeah, it was basically like a big psych. I mean, yeah, they leave a little Venom goober in the MCU, I suppose.
Which is smart. And,
sure.
We've got a video coming out about how that can work, and subscribe to Screen Crush if you haven't already to watch that video.
But I find it pretty unlikely that, at least while they're making more of the Tom Hardy Venom movies, that they will do that. I think that's probably, if Tom Hardy doesn't make another Venom movie, then maybe that's what they'll do. But I feel like I find it unlikely that there will be a a Venom 3 and then 6 months later Spider-Man versus Venom, and it's not the Tom Hardy Venom, just because that's what people would want to see. They're not, I think they sort of, whether it's a legal matter or a practical matter or whatever it is, they decided not to do that. And so I feel like that wouldn't happen. And I don't know, I would have been happy to see the Tom Hardy version and Tom Holland meet, but I don't know that I just want to, I don't know that I need to go through the whole, oh, it's a black costume and I'm evil now. And then, just going through the whole, having to introduce another Eddie Brock or another character or a Matt Gargan or whoever you're going to make Venom. I don't know that I need to see that. I guess the other, as I'm talking here, the other thought that occurs to me is the maybe the most logical way to go to follow this movie after, or, to continue the storyline, if it is going to be another Tom Holland movie, would be with the villain to be Jameson, and then have it be like Spider Slayers or Scorpion or one of those, because as sort of important as J. Jonah Jameson is in the movie in terms of the plot mechanics, he doesn't really even have a scene with Peter Parker or with Spider-Man. He's very much on the fringes of the story. And so they, he totally screwed over Spider-Man and Peter Parker, but they never really have there's no confrontation, there's no resolution to that tension. So they left a lot there on the table that, as I'm sitting here and just rambling on, I'm realizing that would probably be the most logical way to go, is to make him a more central figure. And then the way they always used to do it in the comics is that, he would hire some bad guy, whether it was Scorpion, whether it was, create the Spider Slayers with Smythe, I think his name is. Like, that would probably be a pretty logical and satisfying way to go from here. But that's assuming, again, like, you're going to directly continue the whole storyline. And again, as I'm literally just rambling on, the problem with what I just said is that J. Jonah Jameson now does not know who Spider-Man is again. So he can still hate Spider-Man, which I guess he does at the end of the movie, but Peter's like, if Peter walked up to him and been like, you told everyone I was Spider-Man, it would be like, no, I didn't. I have no idea what you're talking about, because he doesn't remember it. Mm-hmm. So I guess maybe that could be interesting, but that could also, I could see that presenting story problems too, is that you have like an angry hero at a villain who doesn't even know that he did something. So perhaps that might be a hang up that you might go, okay, let's do Kraven instead or something. I don't know.
Well, Jameson, at the end of the movie, Jameson, I think there's like a radio broadcast or there's a TV broadcast where you hear him still insulting Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And
he's still saying,
Spider-Man
is a menace!
Right, exactly. One thing I did love about this movie is you see that it started off as this controversial website, dailybugle.net, which is InfoWars, where he's filming in his
right.
apartment, probably his studio apartment. And because of Spider-Man, over the course of a couple months, he rides to fame, and he's got a big studio. I loved that, and I just assumed they were planning on doing the Scorpion because Matt Gargan's already appeared before. But I'm going to throw out a wild one I'd like to see. So this movie did a great job taking a storyline that people hated in the comics. Brand New Day, One More Day, right, Matt? Yes, One More Day.
Yes.
And
yes.
It took that basic idea of erasing everybody's memories and it made it into a whole movie blockbuster that everybody's going to love. Why not the Clone Saga? Where is my Jackal movie? Where's my Miles Warren movie? Where's my army of Tom Hollands fighting each other? If they can make One More Day good, why not the Clone Saga? Spider Slayer, Kane, throw it out there. Bring back all the dead people. Clone May. Clone Tony Stark. Why not? Let's see if they can make it good.
I mean, you raise like a good reason to do it, which is like, yes, you could bring back an Aunt May, and that would be interesting. The reason not to do it, besides the fact that people do hate that storyline, is you just had a movie with a bunch of Spider-Men in it, and so I feel like it would be less novel. You know what I mean? Like, I guess if Sony sits there and goes, well, what did people like about this movie? And their response is, it had a crap load of Spider-Man in it. That is one way to do that again in a different way. On the other hand, the way this movie ends, if they're going to sort of continue it in a direct way, which they may not, is it does kind of present a very stripped down, back to basics, very iconic Spider-Man 101 is sort of what it presents as what would be next. Doesn't mean they have to do it, but that's where they left things. It would be a little odd to be like, here's your classical Spider-Man as everyone, when they close their eyes, this is what they think of as Spider-Man. And now here's 100 versions of him, and one of them is all scarred up and wearing a purple cape, and another one is like calling himself Spider-Side, and he's stretching all over the place. Like, I feel like that would maybe be there'd be a little tension or conflict between those two things. No, you like it.
No, okay. I want it like Gremlins too. I want there to be a bat Spider-Man. I want a vegetable Spider-Man. Sure. I want like a super smart Spider-Man. I want a lady Spider-Man. I want an electric Spider-Man. I want it to go bonkers. Oh, cursed. No, I mean, I kid. The thing I would actually really like to see is a completely street-level story with Kingpin and Daredevil and Jameson kind of more at the front and center, like you said. But you literally ticked off everything I was going to say, so I had to come up with something outlandish to put on the thumbnail. And Rachel, what was your take on Venom?
But I like that Venom end credit scene because I think that is in line with their Eddie Brock and Venom in that universe, that the entire time all this is happening, they're trying to figure out how to get there, and then they do, and it's over. They're like, I gotta go back home. I don't get to join in. Like, it's done. Like, I think that's funny. And I also screamed Danny Rojas in the theater because I love Ted Lasso and was like, it's Danny! And then like no one
football is life
was like, okay. But yeah, I think it's in character for that version of Eddie Brock that like they never get there because they're trying to figure out what's going on.
No, I totally agree that the same guy who is letting this alien toddler wreck his entire apartment and can't actually like get his life together. I thought it made total sense that he accidentally gets drunk in Mexico for the entire movie.
I think the scene is entertaining. I don't have a problem with the scene in and of itself. I don't really care one way or the other. I have to be honest with you. Where I think some fans are going to be upset is that they just had a couple of months ago a movie where they were like, are you guys ready for this? Hang on to your butts. Spider-Man and Venom are going to hang out. They're going to meet. They're going to fight. Venom is in the MCU. It's happening. It's all happening. And then, they certainly, any interviews they were doing after that, they were like, just keep watching. You're going to see. Wait until you see what happens. We realize there's a lot of possibilities we could do here. And then in this, they're like, we just get, Marvel is, so good at giving fans, what they want. Even when they don't know that they want it, this movie is oh, you want to see Tom Holland meet the other Spider-Man? Guess what? That's what you're going to get. And it's not even going to be, a minute. They're going to spend, a half an hour together, hanging out, being pals, doing science stuff, fighting. That they absolutely know what their audience wants, and they know how to deliver for their audience. It's one of the things that they're best at. So it's somewhat out of character for them to be they're kind of trolling the audience deliberately here. Unless they thought they were going to do it and then backed off, how else can you interpret that ending where they were yes, Venom is in the MCU. Not anymore. Just kidding.
I
He's
hope
back
it
where
was
he
a
went.
slap on the wrist for spoiling so much of this movie that Sony and Marvel was like, this is what you get.
Punitive.
We
Wow.
you into thinking that.
A very vindictive company. I guess it's possible. Like I said, it's a cute scene. I chuckled. But I do think some people who really got excited, and people seemed pretty excited about the Venom post-credit scene, are going to there was when we saw the movie at the press screening, there was a lot of excitement, cheers, applause, screams when these characters that people love show up and they do exciting things. When that scene ended, there was there was an audible, not even there wasn't it was more people were disappointed, which is again a weird thing for Marvel to do because that's just not their bag. They kind of live on, we're going to give you what you want. And this was a weird case of them doing the opposite. So, again, it's a very amusing scene, but I just think that is sort of the larger issue for some people. Not for me. I don't really care.
I think any other movie, it would have been a bigger deal. But because this one, like you said, had so much fan service and great character stuff and all the villains and everything, I think people were so satiated, they were like, oh, okay. I think this was the equivalent of the end of Avengers Age of Ultron when Steve Rogers stands up and says Avengers, and then they cut it off because they didn't know it at the time, but of course 2, 3, 4, 5 movies later we finally got to hear him say Avengers Assemble. So it's that build up to that because they left like from The Big Lebowski, I happen to know there's a little tiny Venom on the way, so that'll make everything better for the fans in the end.
Yeah, that's a fair point. They did, but again, they didn't leave half of Tom Hardy hanging around. He went back to his home dimension. So, I don't know. I guess we'll see.
I'm not mad about that. It's one of those things that maybe they'll bring Topher back. Who knows?
He should have been in this one. Why wasn't he in it? He knows Spider-Man's identity.
He died. Yeah,
he knows Spider-Man's identity. He died fighting Spider-Man.
That would have been a funny twist. Is you see Venom and you think you're Tom Hardy's here, and then it reveals and it's Topher Grace.
Now that would have been trolling.
I would have lost my mind. Instead of Sandman, it's Topher Grace.
That would have been incredible trolling.
Venom would have made a lot more sense than Sandman because Sandman isn't really one of Peter's failures. It would have fit better with the theme because Venom is one of Peter's failures, and I think the reason they didn't do it was because there already is a Venom, and they don't want to confuse people, and people didn't really like Topher Grace's Venom as much, even though Topher Grace is awesome. So they said, no, we'll bring in the other one from that movie because we can't bring in Harry because that's more than one Goblin, and he died a good guy. So it just and James Franco. So I think they did the best they could, but they didn't need a villain from each movie. Well, guys, thanks for joining me and talking about Spider-Man today. Tell the people where they can find you, Matt.
Well, I'm the editor of Screen Crush, screencrush.com, so you can find me writing over there all the time. My Twitter account is twitter.com/Matt Singer. I should probably know that. And yeah, you want to flash my book one more time? I don't even have a copy of it handy, but you do. So there you go. If you want to read my Spider-Man book, there it is. Spider-Man from Amazing to Spectacular. Thank you. Yeah, there you go.
Rachel, where can the people find you?
You can find me writing about a lot of things. A lot of times it's about Spider-Man at The Mary Sue. I also host Pedro Pascal, where me and my co-host go through all of Pedro Pascal's filmography, and I yell about how I wish he was Kraven the Hunter. And you can follow me on social media. It's Rachel Leishman on Twitter, and then Rachel_Leishman everywhere else. And yeah, I am always screaming about some movie franchise or character or whatever on those platforms.
All right, well, thanks for joining us. And if you guys have any thoughts or comments of your own, leave them down in the comments or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.